Hello everybody and welcome to my series of micro lessons. These short lessons will focus on common errors that are often made when writing literature essays and will give you guidance and advice on how to fix them. Today we're going to be looking at how you can layer your analysis within a literature essay. So let's have a look at the problem. So your discussion of a quotation is brief. So when you're looking at the play, the poem, the novel, you feel like you can identify actually quite a lot of things that you want to analyse, and you're quite good at verbally analysing, but then when it comes to putting it into an essay, you find that your response is a little bit brief, or it's a bit vague, or you find that you can only say one thing about a quotation when really you know that you could say more. So what is the solution? Decide on at least two different parts of the quotation that you feel that you can analyse. So maybe just jot down some notes before you start and do a bit of a brainstorm. And then just analyse one at a time and use a connective to link them together and to show that you are actually developing your ideas further and you are building layers of analysis. So let's have a look at the error example. Duffy creates a moving experience for the reader by presenting the strength of the love from the mother. The strength of the maternal love can be seen in stanza 1 when the speaker says, "I stood at the edge of my child's sleep." Duffy uses the metaphor, the edge of sleep, to highlight the fact that the child's sleep is a place that the mother cannot enter. So we have our point here, and every time I've made reference back to the point, I've underlined it just so that you can see how important that is. And I've highlighted every time I've analysed something about that quotation. Now you can see here that I was only able to analyse one thing. So the most obvious thing that you can pick out is the fact that it's a metaphor. So that's a good thing to do. So start with the most obvious, start with the one that you think is maybe the most important part of that quotation, and that is the metaphor here. And then I've shown what the metaphor does within this quotation. So it highlights the fact that the child's sleep is a place that the mother cannot enter. So I've shown that I've understood what that metaphor does, and I've also linked it back to my point up here. But it doesn't really do that much, and if I was to move on, it may seem a little bit brief. So let's have a look how you can layer your analysis. And when you layer, you're just adding one layer on top of another. It's like you're building a response. Imagine building blocks and putting one on top of the other. So what we'll do is we'll continue from here. So we've got the metaphor, so we've already discussed that. But then the response continues here, and you can already probably see the amount of green we've got. So you can probably see that we not only have got an extra layer here, but we've taken it further. So we've got 3 different things that we were able to analyse just in one quotation. So we're really doing an in-depth analysis here. This idea of the mother being on the outside is further compounded by the choice of the word edge. Now notice how I have tried to make a transition here. So it's not a connective, but it's a transitional phrase. So I've linked what I've said previously to show that I'm now carrying on the same idea, but I'm going to use a different part of the quotation to prove it, which illustrates the liminal position the mother occupies, as she is both a part of the child's life and at the same time a mere observer. However, the use of the possessive determiner my, so this is now my second piece of language analysis. I've gone for technique, language, language. Shows that this does not deter the mother or affect her love. So we've gone back to my point up here. Instead, the reader is given to understand that she's happy just to be near to the sleep, even though she cannot penetrate it. Duffy effectively demonstrates the power of a mother's love and describes a mother whose maternal bond is constant, even when her child is asleep and seemingly separate from her. So I've then showed how everything links together. So all the different parts of that quotation, all the different pieces of analysis, shown how they all link together and go back to my point and the question. So I would like to remind you at this point, do check out my lessons on how to analyse language choices and how to analyse techniques. They're 2 different short micro lessons, and that will kind of give you an idea of where I've got all of this from and how I've managed to develop the analysis of both a technique and language. So here are my top tips for you. Before you begin to write up your analysis, ensure you've chosen a quotation that's got multiple features to analyse. So just do a quick brainstorm or quickly highlight what could you comment on. How many techniques could you comment on? Sometimes you can comment on, for example, if it's poetry, you can comment on a simile, but then you may also have caesura, you may also have enjambment. If you're struggling to think of multiple things to comment on, then maybe try and pick a different quotation. And if you really can't think of anything at all, then that quotation really shouldn't be in your essay. Ensure you include transitions between each layer of analysis. This shows that you're building upon and developing your analysis further, and just showing that all of it kind of ties in together. It shouldn't seem random or disjointed. You can use some of these words and phrases. Some of these did pop up in my own example. These will help you to show that you are building and you're moving on to the next point, but you're pulling the previous point with you to show how they all are linked together. So we have some connectives up here, but we also have some transitional phrases. So this idea is further amplified by the use of an interesting verb. Here we've got, you can include your writer's name, so Orwell or Duffy or Shakespeare continues to show, and then whatever it is you're already trying to prove through the use of simile, metaphor, caesura, enjambment, whatever you choose. Here we've got this idea of maternal love, for example, is further compounded by the use of a metaphor. Repeat the keywords from your point as a way of ensuring your analysis layers are still relevant. Begin by analysing the technique and then choose an interesting word to zoom in and analyse. That's probably a good place to start, and it's a good method to try and remember. Do think about how all of the different aspects of the quotation work together to create meaning. They shouldn't be discussed in isolation. Think about the effect that's created. Why the poet, why the writer, why the playwright chose to include this word here, and why they chose to include a caesura here, why they chose to include a simile, why that particular simile. So you really must deconstruct it and consider what the effect is and why it was used. Remember that you are building a response to the question and you're trying to prove your point, so you must keep coming back to that. And finally, don't overdo it. So you should demonstrate your ability to be selective, and this means not analysing everything. So good analysis doesn't mean that you've analysed every single word in the quotation. You're not then showing that you can be selective. So try not to overdo it. And with that in mind, I've got two options that you might want to try. So you've got your layered analysis option 1. So I call this the duo. So you start by analysing one technique. And then you can move on to your language analysis, and this is where you zoom in on a word, you talk about the connotations, what's suggested, what's implied. Then you've got layered analysis option 2, which is the trio. So same as above, one technique, one language analysis, and then you've got one free choice. This may be that there's another interesting word in there that you want to do close language analysis of, or maybe there's another technique that you've spotted. So maybe, like I said earlier, you've got a simile, but you've also noticed that there's a caesura there, or there's a simile, but then maybe there's also violent imagery. So that free choice is completely up to you depending on the quotation. So these are just some good methods to try and make sure that you've got layers in your analysis, and you can try and stretch yourself to do the trio, or if you feel more comfortable you can just stick with the duo. I hope you've enjoyed my micro lesson on layering your analysis. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any new content that's posted. Thank you very much. Goodbye.